Knowing that most people are usually wrong, I would say we're probably not there. So China has been closed. Now China is opening up. That's going to give a big boost. I would not be surprised if there is not a recession yet. I expect it certainly to come. The world doesn't work that way. If everybody knows something, it's usually wrong. So far, this is not fun. Do not get me wrong. This is not fun, but it's certainly not dramatic or even significant in the history of financial markets.
We're seeing a very serious crypto winter. How should investors survive?
Well, David, the way to survive is not to listen to me or other people. Just stay with what you know. If people invest in only what they themselves know a lot about, then they will know what to do if things go right, and they will know what to do if things go wrong. If I told you to buy X and it went up, you wouldn't know what to do if it went up. You don't know why you bought it. And if it went down, you'd blame it on me. Yeah, you wouldn't know what to do then. You'd blame it on Jim Rogers, but you wouldn't know what to do. So please, if you want to be successful, stay with what you know. And if you don't know anything, do nothing. Put your money in the bank and wait. There will be times. I always would just look for cheap things to invest in. I didn't care about where they were or what they were. It never occurred to me. I thought everybody did that. I would find markets that were cheap and I would invest in them. Some of them were considered strange. I can remember when Germany was considered strange to American investors. But I was just looking for cheap places, cheap things, and I would invest in them. Then people heard about it. They said, oh my gosh, you must be crazy. But they kept working. And so people said, oh, he's Indiana Jones. He goes to places where the people don't go and looks for adventure. Yes, I did look for adventure in my own life as well, but also in my investing life. But it wasn't looking to have a name. It was just looking for something cheap. It's the number one ambition for people, the number one dream, not everybody, but is to get in your car and drive around the world, or your motorcycle or whatever. It was my dream too. I've done it twice, as you know. I did it once on a motorcycle and once in a car, because I wanted to see the world and I wanted to have adventure. Has the world changed? Enormously. Even between my two trips, the world changed enormously. My first trip, you couldn't use credit cards, on the first trip going around. Everything was very, very complicated. And there was the Berlin Wall, there was communism, there was Red China, there was Soviet Union. All that's gone now. Everything has changed dramatically. The 21st century is going to be the century of Asia and the century of China. 40 years ago, there was no China. Now it's the second largest economy in the world, et cetera, et cetera. There are gigantic changes and prosperity taking place in Asia. And I can look out the window and see it. Anybody who doesn't know about it can just look out the window or come to Asia. You'll see. It's astonishing, the changes that have been taking place. But the same thing happened in England in the early 19th century. Astonishing changes took. Look at America. America was absurd 150 years ago. People thought it was a joke. They quickly learned that America was an astonishing success. Largest foreign currency reserves in the world. Japan is number 2. Korea has huge numbers. Many Asian countries have staggering amounts of assets that they have built up. So people's money is coming to Asia, but also some immigration, nothing like it was in America in the 19th century or even the 20th century. But no, people are. I live in Singapore now, and I see more and more foreigners all the time. Somebody's coming, not just with their money, but with their bodies as well. No matter what I think, Goldman Sachs is smarter than I am. We all know that. And so we have to listen to Goldman Sachs. It is certainly happening. It has certainly happened, as I said, in the last 40 years. There are astonishing changes that have taken place and continue to take place. And, the United States is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. I don't like that, but it's a fact. I have to deal with that. 40 years ago, America was still a creditor nation. So changes are taking place, and the world, if you want to be successful, you have to recognize changes and adapt to those changes. Do I like the fact that America is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world? No, I have 2 teenage children, but those are facts, and we have to deal with it.
Could one argue, Jim, that the large amount of debt that America has accumulated is also a reflection of the large global power that America has exerted all around the world over the last 70 years?
History shows that when countries get overextended, either economically, militarily, politically, whatever, they usually peak and go into decline. I'm not talking in my opinion. This is a simple historic fact. Mm-hmm. 100 years ago, Britain was the richest, most powerful country in the world. There was no number 2. 50 years later, it was bankrupt, literally bankrupt. The IMF had to bail out what had been the richest, most powerful country in the world. Go back in history. It has always been changing, and it always will.
Yeah.
When countries get overextended, they usually wind up in decline. Well, what should we do? We should cut spending with an axe. No, with a chainsaw. We have this gigantic debt, and it gets higher every day. We should cut spending. We should start reducing our debt. Are we going to do it? Of course not, David. Come on. If you ran on a policy in Washington, maybe you would get elected. But after a short time, people would say, wait a minute, this is very painful. We don't want to do this anymore. Nobody likes pain, even if they know what's good for you. So no, is America going to do it? No. I mean, I wish we would, but I know simple facts. America is certainly, if you said to most people in America, where do you want to go? They would say America. Where do you want to invest? They would say America. But that's because most people still don't know the facts, just as many people did not know the facts about the UK or about other countries that peaked and went into decline. Yes, no, America's great. We've got great PR, great movies, great TV, great lots of things. But that does not mean that beneath the surface there are not serious problems developing. David, I said I have teenage children. I don't like it. It's a good time to be an old American. It is not a good time to be a young American, in my point of view.
First of all, do you think that was one of the causes of the market correction? And if so, how much further can they go in terms of rate hikes?
Well, do I think they've gone high enough? No, it was only less than 2 years ago that the Federal Reserve was saying there's not going to be inflation. And then they said, oh, it's temporary. Don't worry. This is transitory. These guys don't know what they're doing. Most central bank officials or bureaucrats or academics, they don't know how the world works. They just want to preserve their job. But you said they've raised interest rates. Sure they have, but I repeat, they were 21% on treasury bills, short-term treasury bills last time around. David, we have a very serious problem if we're still worried about 2022. No, the biggest risk of the central banks, not just the Federal Reserve. The guy in Japan has said, he will print, his word, unlimited amounts of money. And he does. Goes to work every day and prints as fast as he can. We have a lot of central banks doing things like that. Therein lies our problem. Whenever you have a lot of money printing, it distorts markets, it distorts inflation, it distorts interest rates and gigantic debt. In 1980, America was a creditor nation. We were still a creditor. Now we're the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. Big things have changed since then, but not for the good, at least not as far as an American, which I am. No, I see what's happening. There was no red, there was still red China then. There was still Soviet Union then. A lot of huge things that have changed in the world. It's very rare in history that everybody has known that a recession is coming. This is the most broadcast and most forecast recession that I've ever seen in my life. And knowing that most people are usually wrong, I would say we're probably not there. It depends on where you're talking about. But for instance, China has been closed. Now China is opening up. That's going to give a big boost to the world economy because they are the second largest economy in the world. So I would not be surprised if there is not a recession yet. I expect it certainly to come. David, I'm sure you're a kid come. the third year of a presidential cycle in American history has usually been a good year in the American stock market. And this is year 3 coming up. And the reason that happens is politicians try to spend a lot of money preparing for year 4, the next election, so they can get reelected. So I would imagine that things are really better than we read, just because the world doesn't work that way. If everybody knows something, it's usually wrong. They know what to do. They know to spend money. They know who in their constituencies wants a new park or a new school or a new road, and they'll spend it. And they will do that. They always have anyway. These are the guys who know how to buy votes. And I suspect that they will do that. That's not to say that there won't be a recession coming eventually. It's just that I have never seen in my investing career or read about one that was so widely anticipated and so widely forecast. The world just doesn't work that way. When everybody knows something, it's usually not right. The stock market is, David, the stock market is down, 19 or 20%?
Something like that.
I mean, I've been around long enough to know that 19 or 20% is not very serious. Wait till it's down 70 or 80%. Wait till you see companies going bankrupt, left, right, and center. So far, this is not fun. Do not get me wrong. This is not fun. But it's certainly not dramatic or even significant in the history of financial markets.